Imagine a king covered in robes, but with a body taken by a cruel and incurable disease. A young monarch who, despite feeling his bones ache and flesh rot, never allowed his soul to be defeated. This is Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, the Leper King, protagonist of one of the most dramatic episodes of the Crusades. In the year 1183, the army of the powerful Sultan Saladin launched a new and devastating campaign against the Christian territories of Galilee. His objective was clear: to weaken the Latin kingdom and pave the way for the final conquest of Jerusalem. But what Saladin did not expect was the overwhelming response of a king whom many already considered unfit to govern, let alone to wage war. Wrapped in bandages and carried in a litter, Baldwin IV would once again show why he was feared by his enemies and revered by his allies. In this video, you will learn all the details of this surprising military twist, the strategies involved, the role of the disease in Baldwin's leadership, and how this episode solidified his legend. Stay with us until the end, and you will see why, even sick, this king was never weak. In the second half of the 12th century, the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem was a fragile Christian fortress nestled in the midst of the Islamic world. Founded after the First Crusade, it faced constant external threats and internal disputes. In 1183, Baldwin had already been reigning for about a decade, fighting not only against foreign enemies, but also against the leprosy that was slowly consuming him. On the other side, Saladin was consolidating his power over Egypt and Syria, reunifying the Muslim forces under his leadership. The balance between the two worlds was precarious. Any offensive could alter the fate of the Holy Land. The year was 1183. Saladin, the charismatic and cunning Sultan of Egypt and Syria, was gathering a massive army. With tens of thousands of soldiers, he advanced forcefully through the lands of Galilee, a strategic region in the north of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The objective was to test the Franks' ability to respond and destabilize the Christian government, preparing the ground for deeper future attacks, perhaps even against Jerusalem itself. The internal situation of the Latin kingdom was serious. Baldwin, although still young, was already suffering in an advanced stage of leprosy. Unable to walk, he depended on a litter to move, and many feudal lords questioned his ability to govern, let alone to lead a war. Still, upon hearing of Saladin's advance, Baldwin did not hesitate. With an iron will and unshakable faith, he ordered the barons to gather immediately, with the aim of marching in defense of Galilee. The Crusader army, though numerically inferior, counted on formidable elements: Templar knights, Hospitallers, local nobles, and above all, the inspiring figure of the king himself. Baldwin was transported in a covered litter, carried by his most loyal men. The chronicler William of Tyre reports that the mere presence of the king on the battlefield was worth 1,000 men. His courage, even in the face of imminent death, inflamed the hearts of his soldiers. While Saladin was devastating towns and villages in Lower Galilee, Baldwin led a risky and swift march to intercept the enemy. His plan was to surprise the Sultan before he could consolidate his positions. In a skillful maneuver, the Crusaders reached the hills near Safed and positioned themselves to protect the region of Nazareth and Tiberias, vital points for Christian defense. The Muslim response was immediate. Saladin, surprised by the speed with which Baldwin mobilized his forces, hesitated. He believed the Christian king was nearly incapacitated and did not expect to find him in the field. Skirmishes began with fierce clashes between Frankish knights and Turkish archers. But the turning point came when Baldwin ordered a coordinated attack by the Templar and Hospitaller forces against the enemy's rear. The action was devastating. Amid the dust and suffocating heat, Saladin's troops retreated. It was the first time in months that the Sultan was forced to abandon a campaign due to Christian resistance. The Leper King, even without being able to wield a sword, had won with his sharp mind, his moral leadership, and his determination. When the Crusaders returned to Jerusalem, Carrying the triumphant king in his litter, the people received him as a hero and living martyr. This episode marked one of Baldwin's last major direct military actions. His body was already showing signs of failure, but his soul remained unbreakable. The victory in Galilee not only temporarily thwarted Saladin's plans, but also reinforced the king's legitimacy before a divided nobility and a kingdom on the brink of collapse. Baldwin's victory in Galilee, although not definitive in a military sense, had profound implications for the kingdom of Jerusalem. It served as a clear warning to Saladin that the leper king was still a formidable adversary. This counterattack, led by a man on the verge of death, became a symbol of resilience, not only among the Crusaders, but also in the European imagination, where heroic accounts of his supernatural leadership spread. But the most complex effects of this episode were internal. Baldwin's temporary triumph masked a fractured political reality. The king already understood that his end was near, and he knew that the succession to the throne was far from peaceful. His main rivals within the court, especially the Count of Tripoli and the increasingly influential Guy of Lusignan, were beginning to maneuver their positions more boldly. Fearing that his death would plunge the kingdom into chaos, Baldwin decided to act. In an unprecedented move, he proposed the joint coronation of his nephew, Baldwin of Montferrat, a frail and still very young boy. Thus the leper king became the official regent, paving the way for a legitimate, though extremely fragile, transition. It was a risky maneuver, but one that demonstrated his strategic lucidity, even in the face of extreme physical suffering. On the spiritual front, the campaign against Saladin also had symbolic impact. For many Christians in the kingdom, Baldwin embodied the ideal of the just king who suffers for the sins of the people, almost like a messianic figure. Monks and chroniclers began to write about him in almost hagiographic tones, associating his physical pain with the purification of Christendom. The fact that a man in such a state had defeated one of the greatest Muslim leaders of the century was seen as a divine sign, a reminder that God still protected Jerusalem. However, Saladin was not defeated. Despite the tactical loss, his long-term strategy remained intact. He would return with even greater force, gathering more tribes, more resources, more allies. And what Baldwin knew perhaps better than anyone else in his kingdom was that time was against him. His body worsened with each passing month, his strength waned. In private, he wrote urgent letters to the kingdoms of Europe, pleading for reinforcements and the arrival of a new crusade. But the West was distracted by its own wars. Baldwin was not just a king, he was a symbol of resistance in times of despair. The campaign of 1183 in Galilee showed the world that true leadership does not require physical strength, but courage, clarity, and faith. Facing a formidable enemy and a devastating disease, Baldwin led like few others, turning his bodily weakness into a spiritual and moral fortress. His victory against Saladin did not stop the future advance of Muslim armies, but it gained precious time for Jerusalem. More than that, it revealed how essential Baldwin's presence was to maintaining the fragile unity of the Crusader states. After his death, the kingdom would plunge into internal disputes that would open the way for the fall of the Holy City a few years later. Today, Baldwin is remembered as one of the most singular monarchs of medieval history, the leper king, who, even with his body in collapse, stood firm as the shield of Christendom. If this story moved you, like the video, share it with those who enjoy history, and subscribe to the channel. Here, each episode is a journey to the heart of the past. Until the next crusade.